Welcome to Producer's Toolbox. I'm your host, Carole Adrienne, and today we have a subject that's been so popular with you, our audience, which is the topic of doing voiceover acting. And we have a super special guest who is a good friend of our station, Andy Field, out of Louisiana today. He is a very well-known voice actor who does all kinds of different voices and, in fact, has served our country for more than 3 decades in the military. So thank you, Andy, on all counts.
Hey, Carol, thanks.
Before, we're going to introduce the audience to some of your work, but can you tell them a little bit about the range of stuff that you do?
Yeah, sure. So I've been doing this about 10 years, and I do almost anywhere that someone would pay for a voice. You can find me, except maybe audiobooks, which I don't like doing, but commercials, video games, educational courses, and by commercials, sometimes at the national level and sometimes Joe's car dealership, in wherever. Sometimes strange things. I've had a client before where we were the voice of a hearing aid. So, there's a voice in the hearing aid that says auditorium, outside, inside, small room, all those. I'm one of the navigational voices in the Waze navigation app. So it really, it's the gamut. Anything that could be voiced, I think I've done. I've never done a toy. I'd really like to do a toy.
Oh, you would be good.
That would be fun.
Well, let's show and listen to you doing the next best thing to a toy. Andy voices the snowman in this opening of a commercial.
Oh, that looks great. Hey, Dad, can we borrow your hat?
Yeah.
Happy New Year! Have you thought about new auto insurance? Polar Insurance, we're the coolest around.
This year, ditch the gimmicks. Upgrade to NJM for top-rated service and great rates.
You guys got any hot cocoa?
Bojangles are mascots, just great insurance. NJM.
Well, I think the kids from that commercial are probably still in therapy from encountering that snowman. But just to give you an idea of the wide range of voices and personalities that a good voiceover actor has to do, this is another clip of Andy, and this is actually how I met him. He was cast in my documentary series, Civil War Medicine, by Philadelphia Post Scott Waz. And here he is portraying a really important Confederate surgeon, Dr. John Julian Chisholm, who invented a much more efficient way to administer anesthesia before surgery. So here's Andy as Dr. Chisholm.
It appears that every gunshot wound is accompanied by a certain amount of shock or a partial paralysis of sensation, which is nature's preparation, permitting a thorough examination with little or no pain. The unusual quiet of a hospital the night following a battle has been repeatedly noticed and is accounted for by this nervous shock. When this condition passes off, then reaction brings with it much suffering.
Well, that's about as far from the crazy snowman as you can get. So, now I wanted to ask you, because there is a big convention in Atlanta, an annual event for voiceover actors. Sometimes they deal with adults and kids, sometimes it's just adults, but apparently teenagers have attended these classes. Andy, can you tell us a little bit about it's Voiceover Atlanta?
Yeah, so VO Atlanta is in March this year, March 7th through 10th. And we have several voiceover conferences throughout the United States, but this one's grown into the biggest. And if you've gone to professional conferences for whatever it is you do, when I say the biggest, I mean, close to 1,000 people. I used to be a teacher and I'd go to conferences with tens of thousands of people, but close to 1,000. So it's pretty big. And yeah, it's really the programming there is really diverse. There's stuff for kids. I saw something this year where there's just going to be a panel on, how to kind of help your kids along. So there's going to be parents of working voice talent there. But there's like Spanish voiceover, and there's audiobooks, and there's how to get more work in e-learning, and there's opportunities to read in front of agents and casting directors, and there's big panels full of several agents, who are all saying this is the best thing to do. But really, the programming at this one, it's grown big enough so that it's one of those conferences where, say, at 11 a.m., there may be 3 or 4 things out of 6 or 7 that you want to attend. So they're pretty good, and you can also, it's all recorded, so you can go back after the conference and watch the ones you missed. But it's really developed into a huge thing. And yeah, a friend of mine brought his 14-year-old daughter last year, and she didn't want to go to everything. She didn't want 8 hours. Those of us who are there for work are there for work. But she went to the ones that she wanted to go to. She got to read in front of a Disney casting director and really learned a lot, and really, it's a good experience for everybody. I walk out of there fired up every year.
Now, in terms of working with children, there are roles available for children. What kind of things do they voice?
Well, I mean, you hear me in commercials all the time, and I always start with commercials because that's the most prolific voiceover work for anybody. They're everywhere, but there's always a kid in a commercial. My mom always chooses Jif peanut butter, or my throat hurts, or the Flintstone vitamins, those kind of things, or for toys. But we hear them a lot in promos, which are kind of in voiceover. A promo is kind of a commercial for a TV show. So you'll hear a kid say, next up on Wizards of Waverly Place, or this Saturday, on this episode of Ed, and Eddie, or whatever. I'm probably naming shows that have been off the air for a decade, but so you would find them on Nickelodeon and the Cartoon Network and some other channels, kind of doing the promo voices for those. You'll hear them as toy voices. A lot of times when you squeeze a little unicorn and they say, you're my best friend, then that's sometimes a child voice, sometimes an adult portraying a child voice. But really,
one famous child portrayed by an adult that we were talking about the other day. Can you tell us a little about that?
Oh yeah, Bart Simpson is Nancy Cartwright, and I don't know how old she is, slightly older than I am, but she's been voicing Bart Simpson for, close to 30 years now, I think. I don't know how long the Simpsons have been on the air, but the advantage there is that the voice never changes. If you hire a 12-year-old boy, you're going to get a new 12-year-old boy, maybe every year, depending on how 12-year-old boys go. But with Nancy, it's the same voice every single time.
I saw an old movie about the Vienna Boy Choir, and it was a very searing depiction of what happens sometimes with boys as their voices change and they begin to crack. Then you get thrown out of the choir.
You get thrown out. That's right.
Oh.
So yeah, that's an interesting thing too. And I have friends who have, tween boys who are doing voiceover, and it's interesting to watch their change. You go from, you can't voice a video game hero when you're 12, unless that's specifically a child hero. But 2 years later, you might be voicing somebody in their 20s, because nobody can tell. It's just a question of, can you bring yourself into that mindset, and sound like somebody in their 20s. But it's kind of neat.
Now, it's possible to audition online for voiceover roles, right? There are some reputable, responsible online agencies where you can do that. Now, sometimes you have to pay to audition for a certain level of roles, and some of them are free. Can you tell us a little about those?
Yeah, and really almost all of there are some voice talent in New York City and Los Angeles that still go audition in person, but I've been doing this 10 years and have never auditioned in person for anything. It's all been online. Except one time I got a call back and had to fly to Los Angeles, and I didn't get the part, but it was for the Honey Nut Cheerios Bumblebee in the commercial. And but other than that, everything's been online. So all of my agents send me auditions online. Sometimes just the client directly is casting. Sometimes it's a post-production studio like Scott there at Philadelphia Audio Post. But yeah, almost all of them come online. And then there are places where you can go seek those auditions. There are pay-to-play websites where you pay some money, you the voice talent, and then those auditions are available to you. And the voice seeker isn't paying anything for that service. And there's ups and downs and pros and cons to those. They got really saturated during COVID when anybody with a microphone decided, they wanted to be a voice talent. And so it's a little more competitive than it used to be. But the cream still rises to the top, even on those pay-to-play websites, too.
Yes. Well, at the end of this segment, we're going to put up a slide with some URLs, contact information for two of the best known, most reputable online voice auditioning agencies, Voice123 and Voices.com. Now, there's one important factor that I kind of learned the hard way when I was first hiring actors for voiceovers, which is acting is a key word there. And I made the mistake, I guess, 3 friends who really have beautiful speaking voices and who said, "Oh, let me audition for your show because everybody tells me I have such a great voice," which they do. But when they read, they did not have acting skills. It's really important to have those acting skills. So in terms of preparing to enter the field of voice acting, would you say that's one of the key things to pay attention to?
Yeah, I'd say it's the key thing. It's if you ask really anybody who's established in voiceover, what do I need to do to start? The answer is always take acting lessons. And some people will say you need to take acting lessons for like a year before you even buy a microphone. I think that's wrong. For my personality, if that were the case, I would just quit after a couple of weeks. I need to hear my voice on a microphone. That'd be like taking guitar lessons and not buying a guitar for the first couple of months. I want to do it. But yeah, being able to develop the ability to interpret a script, being able to convey some emotion. Really, the buzzword nowadays is conversational. We want commercials, especially, to be conversational more than the typical announcer read. In 1950, it was, try Colgate toothpaste. It's the best because of this. But now it's more like, hey, Colgate toothpaste really is, it's changed my life. It's the best, or whatever. But you're just a regular dude. And that is surprisingly challenging. You could literally take the words I just said conversationally, print them out in a script, and it would sound completely different if somebody tried to read it. It's just the skill to make it sound real, to tell the story authentically is really hard.
Would you do that same line again, as you said, in announcer mode and in conversation mode? Just because it's a good idea to record and listen to yourself, right? When you're starting out.
Oh yeah, definitely. And on occasion, you'll get an audition that says traditional, stereotypical, over-the-top announcer. But usually, like one of the biggest casting directors out of LA, it typically says conversational, grounded, not announcery at all. It says it in every single audition. We want you to sound like you just were saying these words, so as opposed to, what was a product back in the 70s, was it Dapper Dan? Dapper Dan hair gel, makes your hair look fantastic. But if people use Dapper Dan these days, it would be more like, I use Dapper Dan and, the ladies love it. Every time I go out, they're like, what's up with your hair? And I'm like, I'm a Dapper Dan man, So it's more, and then, there's always all the nuance in it. Sometimes they want kind of a fine line between those two. And then sometimes in the commercial spot, you shift from conversational. Maybe you just want to deliver the tagline a little more announcery. Dapper Dan, since 1937. And that's a little more announcery. But yeah, like you were saying, and if it's a short script, I think that, like James Earl Jones saying, this is CNN. Well, you could just get somebody with a beautiful voice to say that 20 or 30 different ways, and you're going to find the one you want forever. But getting James Earl Jones to play somebody's dad in a cartoon, that's a little bit harder because you've got to sound real, and you don't have the advantage of body language and facial expression to convey that the way on-camera actors do.
You're right. You're not seeing the other actor or hearing them contemporaneously. Mm-hmm. The other thing is accents. I know now the series that I'm working on, Civil War Medicine, they're all quotes, original quotes from doctors who served during the Civil War. And they came from all over the country. So we cast, there are 80 of them total, and we cast and recorded 40 of them so far. So I have to be specific when it goes out. I give Scott Waz from Philly Post, the casting director, the quote, and then it has, like yours probably said, Dr. John Julian Chisholm, the age at which he was at that point, late 40s to early 50s. I think he was from Charleston. So a Charleston accent is a Southern accent that's going to be very different from a Louisiana Southern accent.
And you'd be thrilled to know that I got on YouTube and listened to Virginia accents. But even now, a 2000 Virginia accent is different than an 1800s Virginia accent. But it's fun. There are voice actors out there who are students of accents. They're amazing, and they can fool someone in England when they're walking around in England. When I started voiceover, I thought that was me, and that is not me. I am not. Typically, if I get an audition for an accent, I just don't do the audition unless it's an accent, a Southern accent, a New Orleans accent, a Cajun accent. Those are all, Texas. Those are all just kind of variants on each other. I know that 1800s Virginia didn't put R's at the ends of their words, didn't put R's at the end of their words, kind of like in Boston. Right. But that's the Hollywood Southern accent. That's the, I always laugh that Sally Field has the same accent in Forrest Gump and Steel Magnolias, and those two towns are about a 9-hour drive from each other. Those are drastically different accents. But
I'm going to have to go back and listen.
Yeah, well, she filmed Steel Magnolias. That's the town I live in now. Was filmed here, and it's a true story from here. So, but those Southern accents. Also, there's 6 different Southern accents between those 6 ladies in Steel Magnolias. But it's everybody has to do what they have to do. But accents are challenging, and they're really kind of a whole other thing. And I found that at this stage in my career, I've done enough exercises where I can listen to someone speak, and I can spend a little bit of time playing the video over and over again and say, oh, this is how they do a short A, and this is how they do a long A. But still, it's kind of challenging to watch for those in the script as you're delivering it.
What were the instructions that came with the Crazy Snowman ad?
Oh,
you remember?
I'm trying to think. I might be able to pull it up here real quick.
Psycho Snowman.
Yeah, let's see. I'm trying to see if the script is there.
Because it is, in a way, it's akin to the voice of a toy or a cartoon, but there's something really off balance and
that was you're kind of hitting where they were aiming with that. It was kind of this whole Frosty the Snowman vibe, but a little creepy and a little scarier, And so, but they still wanted it a little warm. So it was kind of a challenge. We spent a couple hours recording that. And that we've recorded it and everybody in the room was happy. And then they went back to the boss and the boss says, I'd like it a little warmer. So we had to go back and redo it all. It was challenging, but it was fun. I'm trying to see.
It's a very strong performance, I thought. And it really, when those kids run away screaming, I watched it 3 times laughing.
Let's see. Is this it?
Now, if you're a parent who's got a child or children who have expressed a serious interest in doing voiceovers, how would you prepare your kids for that? And also, I think with any acting with children, there's a huge level of parental involvement that's required. You can't just send your kid out there and say good luck, right?
For sure. And I think that if you suspect at all that your child is going to be an actor of any sort or is going to be interested in that, whether it's on camera or voice, being a good reader is important. And we didn't talk about this the other day. This is my education degree coming in. The more you read to your children and the younger you start with that, the better readers they're going to be. And I think that makes my life so much easier because I'm a strong reader. Is that I don't have to spend as much time wrestling with what the script means. I know what the script means, and I'm already there. Whereas I've had friends with beautiful voices who are just trying to make words pretty, and it sounds like they're not sure what the words mean. They're just, they're still wrestling with getting the words out as opposed to telling the story that the writer has written. And so being a strong reader helps. Acting classes are going to help. Even a voice actor should take, other acting classes. They don't have to be specific voice acting classes. In fact, those are cheaper usually than voiceover classes. And you can find those locally. I mean, you can take a theater class at high school for free, and those aren't the best in the world, but they're better. They're there and they're free. Being a good reader, taking the acting classes, but then you're right, just a huge parental level of involvement because you're a freelancer running a business. Just like if your child wanted to be have a lawn service and you wanted to help your child grow that into a successful business, they're not going to be able to do that alone. A 10-year-old's not going to go print out business cards and market and, make cold calls and things like that. And so, and I'm not saying that's necessarily what you have to do, but you've got to be online and be hustling and seeking all of that. I think at least my first 6 months in voiceover, I was probably up until 1 a.m. every night just doing, because I was working. Also, I was teaching middle school. But I mean, I was up auditioning and seeking and reading and, just trying to figure out how to succeed in this business, which is what it is. And it's different if you're in LA and New York, as opposed to out here on the continent, the rest of us.
We have done a few different episodes with casting agents and shows on dealing with children. And one of the things that they pointed out, and I'm sure it would apply to voiceover acting, casting as well, is that there's a lot of rejection, just as in any kind of auditions for acting. So you really have to prepare your kid for multiple tries or multiple visits or multiple auditions. Is there anything that you would comment on that?
Yeah, and really that's true for adults too. I mean, you'd be surprised how many adults get in the voiceover forums and go, gosh, I can't handle it. And you definitely get used to it, when you're doing hundreds of auditions a month or similar numbers. After you've done, let's say 10,000 auditions, you certainly aren't expecting a reply. And so some of it comes with just putting in the reps. But with a kid, I think it's helpful to say, look, mathematically, even the best voice actors probably only get 1 out of every 20 auditions. That's the best. 1 out of every 20? 1 out of every 20, so that's 5%. But I would say more realistically for a lot, and on camera actors, it may be 1 out of 100. But, unless you're Tom Cruise, Denzel Washington, those guys, they don't even audition. They just get called in sometimes. We want you. And those are the best jobs when they just hire you. But knowing that number and knowing that you have to get a certain number of no's before you get a yes can kind of help a kid say, well, I just got another one of those no's. I just got to keep getting those until the yes comes. And then you can almost turn it into, high five me. You got one more no on the way to your yes. If you need 100 no's and you've got 80, well, you need about 20 more. So let's go get them, because it's really just a matter. That's assuming that you're good enough and doing all the right things. If you're terrible, you may do 5,000 auditions and never get any. But if you're getting coached and your coach says you're ready, you're good, and your technology is good and your microphone and your studio sound good, you're gonna get it. But a lot of times you're just not the right person. It doesn't matter. I've nailed some auditions before, and then, I listen to the commercial and, it's an ethnic female voice. Well, that's what they wanted. There's no way. It doesn't matter how good I was, and so, or sometimes they want a voice of God. They want James Earl Jones. Well, there's no way, it doesn't matter how good my audition was if they wanted the thunderous, booming voice of God, or if they wanted a kid. Or a teenage voice or a millennial voice. I don't know. I don't want to say millennial. Millennials are like 40 now, some of them. So
they're getting
their knees and back hurt like the rest of us.
I know. Well, one wonderful thing that we have that previous generations did not is the internet.
Oh my
so
goodness.
I guess even if you're 10 years old and that's a goal that you have, voice acting, you can make recordings of your own. You can put them on your website or your LinkedIn page or any other online platform to get it out there. And I would think it's really good rehearsal in a way.
Yeah, it really is. And you can buy a respectable voiceover recording setup for, certainly under $300-400 for an iPad now. And you can edit all of the sound and everything on an iPad. Of course, that still takes some experts in the industry to set you up. But yeah, 10-year-olds I just read, or I was just talking yesterday, are now the first iPad generation. The 10-year-olds are the ones that the iPad came out in 2010. So 13-year-olds and younger are the ones who had the iPad on the table in front of them at the restaurant. Their whole life. They've not known. And so they are technological geniuses. They're like NASA engineers. They can't tie their shoes, but you put an iPad in front of them and they're like, can put a man on the moon. And so, yeah, you give them an iPad with the right microphone setup and all that. They're over there editing audio and putting filters on there. I mean, they're incredible. But again, they don't have the business savvy. Like they would never be on LinkedIn on purpose. A 10-year-old would never intentionally go to LinkedIn. In fact, Facebook is for old people, according to all of them. They're going to be on Discord, and they might be on Twitter. And there's kids booking work left and right on Twitter, but it's like $10 work. So it's, yeah, I booked a role in this video game. And I'm like, yeah, it was free. You didn't get paid for it. Congrats. We all could have booked that, so it's, but you know what? If you're having fun with it when you're 10 and you're getting in little video games and stuff that pay $5-10, good for you. I'm not the kind of person that's going to push a kid, and if they're 20 and they still want to do that, then great. They've built that skill set. But I loved letting my kids just explore things as they went. All three were musicians, and one of them turned out to be a musician. But the other two said, it's not my thing. Good. I think that's the right thing.
Wow. Well, we have about 3 minutes left, I think. And in that, can you tell us, okay, if you are thinking seriously about doing voiceovers, what do you need at home to give a good performance?
Do you mean the technology, the gear?
Or, yeah, in terms of gear.
You're going to need a solid microphone, and I don't mean a $40 one. I've said, I've got a real expensive one. It was $40, and I'm like, ooh, yikes. And then some people will start with a USB mic that you just plug straight into the computer, and there's some of those that are really performing well these days. I don't want to badmouth them, but a solid microphone and interface usually. Don't need an interface if it's a USB microphone. But really the space you record in is way more important than the microphone. A $3,000 microphone in a bad space is no good. A $150 microphone in a good space is great. So I used to be a science teacher, so here's the science. All the stuff around you needs to be able to absorb water. If it could absorb water, it likely can absorb sound pretty well. So if you can imagine slinging a running garden hose around your head, the less mess that gets made, probably the more sound treated your space is. Now that's not soundproof. You're still the air conditioner system is still gonna bleed in, and the big trucks outside are still gonna bleed in. And when I started out, nobody could push a button on the microwave or flush a toilet or anything like that. That's just part of, soundproof is expensive, but sound treated. Walk-in closet full of clothes, blankets, mattress foam, all that stuff is fine for beginners. That's not what you're looking at in here. I spent some money and time on the stuff in here because this is my livelihood. I make a solid living doing this. But starting out, when I was just hoping to help pay my electric bill, with voiceover, it was a walk-in closet with clothes and mattress foam. And it's about a $150 microphone is what I started with. Decent headphones help. You need to be able to hear. These are $150 headphones that I'm wearing because you need to be able to hear, the things in your sound, because your clients are going to be listening through $150 headphones. And if you're using, your AirPods, then that's not going to work.
Well, it's an extraordinary profession, and voiceover actors really, they excite our imaginations in a way that on-screen actors don't. You really have to be able to take us beyond what we can see into what we feel when we hear it. So thank you so much, Andy. It was always so much fun to have you on the show. And I look forward to seeing everybody again. Please join us on Producer's Toolbox. And the URLs are going to come up at the end of the episode. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.